At 03:47 hours on December 27, 1942, Second Lieutenant Richard Bong sat in the cockpit of his P-38 Lightning at Laloki Airfield near Port Moresby, watching the sun rise over the Owen Stanley Mountains while his crew chief finished the pre-flight check. Bong was 22 years old, fresh from the United States, 0 combat missions, 0 kills. 40 Japanese aircraft were inbound to attack the Allied beachhead at Buna. Bong would be flying straight into them with only 11 other P-38s from the 39th Fighter Squadron. Bong had been in New Guinea since mid-November. He was supposed to be with the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group, but they were still flying P-40 Warhawks. General George Kenney had sent Bong to fly temporarily with the 39th Squadron because they had just received P-38s and needed pilots who knew how to fly them. For 6 weeks, Bong had waited, trained, and prepared. The problem was that knowing how to fly a P-38 and knowing how to survive combat in one were completely different things. The P-38 Lightning was unlike any fighter in the world. Twin engine, twin boom design, tricycle landing gear, all guns mounted in the nose, fast in a straight line, absolutely deadly at high altitude, could outrun almost anything the Japanese flew. But it had one problem that was killing American pilots. It could not turn with a Zero. The Mitsubishi A6M0 was lighter, more agile, more maneuverable. In a turning fight, the Zero could complete a full horizontal turn far faster than the heavier P-38. That difference meant death. American doctrine said P-38 pilots should never turn with a Zero. Never try to outmaneuver them. Use speed, use altitude, boom and zoom tactics. Dive in from above, build up speed to 400 miles per hour, shoot, then climb back to altitude before the Zeros could react. Hit and run. Don't get caught in a turning fight. Don't slow down. Don't try to dogfight. The doctrine was clear. The problem was that doctrine worked perfectly in training and failed catastrophically in combat. Bong had been taught boom and zoom at Hamilton Field in California. His instructors had drilled it into him. Never turn with a Zero. Use your speed, use your altitude, always maintain your energy advantage. But Bong had also heard the stories from pilots who had actually fought Zeros. The Japanese pilots were smart. They knew American doctrine. They knew P-38 pilots would try to dive, shoot, and climb away. So they adapted. They positioned themselves to force American pilots into bad situations. They baited P-38 pilots into slowing down, into turning, into losing their speed advantage. And once an American pilot was slow and turning, the Zero pilots closed in and killed them. American pilots throughout the Pacific were being shot down in turning engagements they tease over, could not escape. The training manual said the problem was pilot error. The instructors said these pilots weren't following doctrine, but the pilots who survived knew better. The problem was not pilot discipline. The problem was that combat did not follow training scenarios. Combat was chaos. Combat was Zeros coming from directions you did not expect. Combat was running out of altitude, while Zeros were still on your tail. Combat was having to choose between turning to help your wingman and following doctrine that told you to run. Bong did not know any of this yet. He was about to learn it. Captain Thomas Lynch was the flight leader. Lynch was 26 years old, already an ace with 5 confirmed kills. 3 of those kills had come while flying the P-39 Airacobra, a fighter so inferior to the Zero that pilots called it a death trap. Lynch had survived flying the P-39 by being smarter than everyone else. He understood energy management. He understood deflection, shooting. He understood how to position himself in 3-dimensional space to maximize his advantages and minimize his vulnerabilities. Most importantly, Lynch understood that the manual was written by people who had never been shot at. Lynch was about to teach Bong how to actually survive. At 06:15, Lynch briefed the mission. 12 P-38s would fly top cover over the Buna beachhead. They would patrol at 18,000 feet. Japanese aircraft were expected. The brief was short. Lynch did not waste time on doctrine. He told Bong one thing: stay on my wing, do exactly what I do, don't think, React. If I turn, you turn. If I dive, you dive. If I tell you to brake, you brake immediately. No hesitation. No questions. Bong understood. He was the new guy. His job was to watch Lynch's back and learn how to stay alive. At 06:45, they took off. 12 P-38s climbed through the morning air, crossed the 13,000-foot peaks of the Owen, Stanley Mountains, and took up patrol positions over Buna at 18,000 feet. The air was clear. The ocean stretched blue to the horizon. Below them, cargo ships unloaded supplies for American and Australian troops fighting to hold the beachhead. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was the last moment of peace Bong would experience that day. At 08:10, the radar station at Port Moresby reported inbound Japanese aircraft, estimated 40 fighters and bombers. 8 minutes out, Lynch's voice came over the radio. Calm, measured. No emotion. He positioned his flight up Sunday altitude advantage. Speed advantage. Perfect bounce position. Bong's heart was hammering in his chest. His hands were sweating inside his gloves. His mouth was dry. This was nothing like training. At 08:18, Bong saw them, specks against the ocean, growing larger. Aichi D-3. Aval dive bombers with Mitsubishi, a 6 M0s escorting. Lynch counted them. 20 Zeros, 8 Vals, 40. 8 Japanese aircraft total. 12 American P-38s, 4-1 odds. Lynch rolled inverted and dove. Bong followed. The P-38 accelerated in the dive, 300 miles per hour. 3, 50, 400. The airframe vibrated. The controls stiffened. The valves grew larger in his gun sight. Lynch fired. Bong saw tracers reach out, saw them connect, saw a valve explode. Debris flying. Then Lynch was calling over the radio. Brake right. Zeros diving from above. Bong broke right. G-forces slammed him into his seat. His vision narrowed. He saw a Zero flash past, so close he could see the pilot's face. The Zero reversed. Bong tried to follow. His P-38 rolled into the turn. It felt heavy, sluggish, like the controls were fighting him. The Zero was already inside his turn, getting smaller, pulling away. Bong tried to tighten his turn, pulled harder on the stick. The P-38 shuddered. The airframe groaned. The stall warning horn screamed. He was 2 plackings the farmis. Slow. He was losing it. Lynch's voice cut through the radio. Don't turn with him. Dive. Bong shoved the stick forward. The P-38's nose dropped. He was diving away from the Zero. Building speed. 400 miles per hour, 420, 450. The Zero could not follow, could not dive that fast. Bong was clear. His hands were shaking. His breathing was ragged. He had almost died. 30 seconds into his first combat, and he had almost died because he tried to turn with a Zero. He looked for Lynch, found him 3,000 feet above. Lynch had shot down 2 aircraft in the time it took Bong to barely escape 1. Bong climbed back to altitude, rejoined formation. Lynch's voice came over the radio again. Calm. Patient. Good. You learned. Now watch this. Lynch dove on. Another Zero. This one was alone, separated from the formation. Perfect target. Lynch came in from the Sunday, 400 miles per hour. Closure rate was insane. The Zero never saw him. Lynch fired from 200 yards, point-blank range. The Zero disintegrated, pieces spinning through the air. Lynch pulled up hard, climbed back to altitude, made it look easy. Bong realized he was watching someone who had mastered combat, someone who understood things the training manual never taught. The dogfight continued for 17 minutes. Bong stayed on Lynch's wing, watched everything Lynch did, how he positioned himself, how he used altitude, how he never got slow, how he never stayed in one place long enough for the Zeros to coordinate against him, how he picked targets that were isolated, vulnerable, distracted, How he killed with precision and then disappeared before the enemy could react. This was not what they taught at Hamilton Field. This was something else entirely. Bong got one more chance. A Zero was chasing a P-38 below him. The P-38 pilot was in trouble. Turning hard. Slow. The Zero was closing. Bong rolled inverted and dove. The P-38 accelerated. The Zero grew larger in his gun sight. The Japanese pilot was fixated on his target. Did not see Bong coming. Bong pressed the trigger. 4 50 caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon opened fire. The recoil shook the aircraft. Tracers reached out. Most missed. A few hit. Sparks flew off the Zero's right wing. Not enough. The Zero snap rolled left and dove. Bong followed. This time he did not try to turn with it. This time he kept his speed, used his dive angle, anticipated where the Zero would be, fired again, 3-second burst. The rounds walked up the Zero's fuselage from tail to engine. The engine exploded, black smoke poured out. The Zero rolled inverted and fell toward the jungle below, trailing fire. Bong's first kill, but there was no time to celebrate. Lynch's voice on the radio, "Good kill, now get out." Bong looked up. 3 Zeros diving on him. He had gotten tunnel vision, had focused on his target and forgotten to check his 6. Fatal mistake. Lynch was already rolling in on the diving. Zeros. Bong shoved the throttles forward and dove, used the P-38's speed to escape. The Zeros could not catch him. Lynch engaged them from above, shot one down, scattered the other 2, saved Bong's life. The engagement lasted 17 minutes total. The 39th Fighter Squadron claimed 12 Japanese aircraft destroyed. 2 Zeros and 1 VAL for Lynch. 1 Zero and 1 VAL for Bong. Other pilots got the rest. No American losses. The Japanese bombers never reached the beachhead. They turned back after losing their fighter escort. Mission success. When Bong landed at Laloki at 09:15, his hands were still shaking. His flight suit was soaked with sweat. He climbed out of the cockpit and walked on unsteady legs to where Lynch was debriefing with the other pilots. Lynch saw him coming. Grinned. "Welcome to the war, kid." The debriefing took an hour. Each pilot described what they saw, where they engaged, what they shot down. Intelligence officers took notes. Confirmed kills, probable kills, damaged aircraft. The 39th Squadron had performed well. 12 enemy aircraft destroyed for no losses. Perfect mission by the numbers. But Bong knew the truth. He had almost died in his first 30 seconds of combat. Almost got himself killed trying to turn with a Zero. Almost forgot to check his 6 while focusing on a target. Lynch had saved his life twice. Once by teaching him to dive away, once by shooting the Zeros off his tail. Without Lynch, Bong would be dead. After the debriefing, Lynch pulled Bong aside. They walked to the edge of the airfield, sat on empty fuel drums. Lynch lit a cigarette, offered one to Bong. Bong did not smoke. Lynch shrugged. Started smoking both. Lynch talked for 20 minutes, explained what Bong had done right, explained what Bong had done wrong. The dive away was good. Using speed was correct. But Bong needed to maintain better situational awareness, needed to know where all the enemy aircraft were at all times, needed to check his 6 constantly, never fixate on one target, never forget that other enemies exist. Lynch explained the close-range philosophy in detail, why it worked, why it was necessary. At long range, deflection shooting required perfect prediction, perfect timing. One mistake and you missed. At close range, mistakes did not matter as much. Point the nose at the target, pull the trigger, hit, simple, dangerous, but effective. Bong listened, absorbed everything, asked questions. Lynch answered patiently. This was not how the Army Air Force taught gunnery. This was practical knowledge, earned through survival. Lynch was sharing lessons that could not be found in any manual. What happened in the next 23 months would transform Bong from a new pilot with 0 kills into America's deadliest fighter ace. But it did not happen because he followed doctrine. It happened because Lynch taught him to ignore doctrine when doctrine would get him killed. The official U.S. Army Air Force's fighter doctrine in 1942 said that gunnery was everything. If you could shoot well from long range, you would be a successful fighter pilot. The training emphasized deflection shooting, leading the target, calculating the correct angle, firing from 400 yards, 600 yards, maximum effective range of the 50 caliber machine guns. The idea was to destroy the enemy before they got close enough to shoot back. It made sense. It was logical. It was completely wrong. Bong had been a gunnery instructor at Luke Field in Arizona before being sent to the Pacific. He knew how to shoot. He understood the mathematics of deflection. He could hit targets on the gunnery range with impressive accuracy. But combat was not a gunnery range. Combat involved targets that maneuvered violently in 3 dimensions, targets that shot back, targets that dove and rolled and reversed when you fired at them. Bong quickly realized that his gunnery skills, impressive on a range, were mediocre at best when the target was trying to kill him. Lynch taught him something the manual never mentioned: close the range, get so close you cannot miss. Ignore maximum effective range, ignore deflection angles. Get within 200 yards, 100 yards, 50 yards if necessary. Point your nose at the target and pull the trigger. At that range, even mediocre gunnery becomes lethal. Lynch said the best range for combat was when you could see the expression on the enemy pilot's face. The tactic was insanely dangerous. Getting that close meant flying through the enemy's defensive fire, meant risking collision, meant flying through debris when the target exploded. Lynch's P-38 had been damaged multiple times, flying through wreckage of aircraft he had just destroyed. On one mission in late November 1942, Lynch flew so close to a zero that pieces of the exploding aircraft damaged his right boom. He barely made it back to base. But Lynch survived because he understood something critical. Being dangerous to yourself was better than being ineffective against the enemy. Better to risk collision than to miss every shot. Bong adopted Lynch's philosophy completely. In January 1943, Bong shot down a Nakajima Ki, 43 Oscar over the Annon Gulf, his 5th kill. 5 kills made him an ace. It had taken exactly 2 weeks of combat. The intelligence officer asked Bong how he was shooting down so many aircraft. Bong told him he got close. How close? Close enough that he could see the rivets on the enemy aircraft. The intelligence officer said that was too close. Bong said it worked. In the months that followed, Bong refined the close-range technique into an art form. He learned to predict where enemy pilots would maneuver, learned to position himself so that when they reversed or dove directly into his guns, learned to fire short bursts instead of long sprays, learned to wait for the perfect moment when the target filled his entire windscreen before pressing the trigger. His hit percentage improved dramatically, not because his gunnery got better, but because the range got shorter. On January 7, 1943, Bong flew a mission escorting P-40 Kitty Hawks bombing a Japanese convoy off Leh. The mission was intercepted by Nakajima Ki 43 Oscars from the Japanese 11th Sentai. During a 5-minute duel, Bong shot down 1 Oscar. The engagement was different from his first combat. This time Bong maintained better situational awareness. This time he remembered to check his 6. This time he used what Lynch had taught him. It worked. On March 3, 1943, during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, Bong engaged a formation of Japanese aircraft escorting a troop convoy. He shot down 1-0 using a 3-second burst from 100 yards. Later, he estimated he had been close enough to see the pilot trying to bail out. On March 29, Bong damaged his P-38 so badly while flying through debris that he had to crash land at Marilinen airstrip. The aircraft was written off as a total loss. Bong walked away without injury. The maintenance crew found pieces of Japanese aircraft embedded in Bong's wings, fragments of aluminum, bits of fabric, evidence of how close Bong had been when he fired. By April 1943, Bong had 14 confirmed kills. He was promoted to first lieutenant. General Kenny asked him about his tactics. Bong explained the close-range philosophy. Kenny said it was reckless. Bong said it was effective. Kenny agreed and told other pilots to learn from Bong's example. Word spread through the 5th Air Force. The official doctrine remained unchanged, but unofficially, pilots throughout the 5th Air Force started closing the range. Lynch and Bong flew together constantly. They developed an informal competition. Who could shoot down more Japanese aircraft? By July 1943, they were tied with 11 kills each. On July 26, Bong had his best day of the war. 4 kills in a single mission over Leh. The mission was a fighter sweep at high altitude. Bong's flight intercepted Japanese fighters escorting bombers. Bong shot down 4 aircraft in rapid succession using the close-range technique Lynch had taught him. The first kill came from 200 yards, the second from 150 yards, the third from 75 yards, the fourth from 50 yards, each engagement closer than the last, each kill more dangerous, but more certain. Bong returned to base with his P-38 damaged by debris from the 4th aircraft. His wingman said Bong had flown through the explosion, said pieces of the Zero had hit Bong's aircraft, said it was the most aggressive flying he had ever seen. Lynch congratulated him, said Bong was getting too good, told him to slow down and let the rest of them catch. "Me up!" Bong laughed, said Lynch should fly faster, but the competition was friendly. They pushed each other to be better, to survive longer, to perfect their craft. The rivalry made them both deadlier. In August, Bong was promoted to captain. He named his P-38 Marge after his girlfriend, Marjorie Vattendahl, whom he had met while on leave in Superior, Wisconsin. He had her photograph painted on the aircraft nose. Other pilots started asking Bong for advice. How do you get so many kills? Same answer every time. Get close. Close enough that you cannot miss. Close enough that it scares you. That is the correct range. By September 1943, Bong had 16 confirmed kills. Lynch also had 16. They were the leading American aces in the Pacific Theater. Other pilots were starting to close the gap, but Lynch and Bong were consistently at the top of the leaderboard. They pushed each other. Every kill by Lynch motivated Bong to fly more aggressively. Every kill by Bong motivated Lynch to take more risks. They were friends. They were rivals. They were trying to break Captain Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 aerial victories. The competition between aces was public knowledge back home. Newspapers tracked the scores. Radio broadcasts announced new victories. Americans followed the race to beat Rickenbacker's record like a sporting event. The War Department understood the propaganda value. Fighter aces humanized the war, gave Americans heroes they could root for, young men they could imagine being. Every victory boosted morale. Every ace interview sold war bonds. But the competition had a darker side. Some pilots took unnecessary risks chasing kills, dove into situations they should have avoided, stayed in combat longer than they should have. The desire for recognition overrode survival instinct. Several promising aces died pushing too hard. Bong and Lynch saw it happening. They talked about it. Agreed that staying alive mattered more than breaking records, but the pressure was always there. The newspapers, the radio, the letters from home asking about their scores. Lynch was promoted to major and given command of the 39th Fighter Squadron in March 1943. Later he was promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of the entire 35th Fighter Group. He continued flying combat missions despite his command responsibilities, continued teaching younger pilots, continued pushing the boundaries of what was considered acceptable combat tactics. On March 8, 1944, Lynch and Bong flew a mission together over Itape Harbor. They spotted Japanese barges unloading supplies. Lynch led the attack. Dove low. Strafed the barges with cannon fire. Set one on fire. Called to Bong that he was going around for a second pass. Bong followed. As they came around, ground fire opened up from positions they had not seen on the first pass. 20mm anti-aircraft guns, hidden in the jungle. Lynch's right engine took multiple hits, exploded. Fire spread across the wing. Lynch's voice came over the radio. Calm at first, then urgent. I'm hit. Engines gone. Fire's spreading. Getting out. Bong watched Lynch's P-38 climb slowly, trailing black smoke, fire consuming the right boom. Lynch fighting for altitude, trying to get high enough that his parachute would have time to deploy. The aircraft was shaking, pieces falling off. Lynch managed to climb to around 2,000 feet, but the fire was spreading faster. It reached the cockpit. He could not wait any longer. He had to bail out. Bong saw the canopy fly off, saw Lynch jump, but the aircraft had lost too much altitude during those final seconds. Lynch bailed out at approximately 100 feet above the jungle canopy. His parachute deployed. It rippled, barely began to open. But there was not enough altitude. Not enough time. Lynch hit the jungle canopy while his parachute was still deploying. The white silk disappeared into green trees. Bong circled the area, called on the radio. No response. Circled again. Nothing. Ground fire started tracking him. He had to leave. His fuel was low. His own aircraft had been hit. He had to get back to base. He marked the position on his map, climbed to altitude, flew home alone. Search parties looked for Lynch for 3 days. Found nothing. The jungle was too thick. The area was too dangerous. Japanese patrols controlled the region. Lynch was declared missing in action, later upgraded to killed in action. His body was never recovered. Lynch had 20 confirmed kills when he died. He was 27 years old. Bong did not fly for a week. General Kenny grounded him, said he needed rest, needed time to process what happened. Bong spent that week in Australia. Did not talk much. Did not sleep well. Kept seeing Lynch bail out. Kept seeing that parachute ripple. Not enough altitude. Never enough altitude. When Bong returned to duty, something had changed. He was quieter, more focused, more aggressive in combat but more cautious about unnecessary risks. Lynch had taught him how to be deadly. Lynch's death taught him that even the best pilots could be killed by bad luck, random ground fire, wrong place, wrong time. No amount of skill could protect against everything. Bong continued flying. January 1944. February. March. Each month brought more kills, more close calls, more friends lost. The war ground on. The Japanese were being pushed back, island by island. American air superiority was growing. But the fighting remained brutal. Every mission could be your last. Bong knew that, accepted it, kept flying anyway. By late March 1944, Bong had 25 confirmed kills, one away from tying Rickenbacker. The pressure intensified. Everyone wanted to be there when he broke the record. Photographers, reporters, newsreel cameramen. Bong ignored them, focused on the mission, on staying as alive, on getting his wingmen home safe. On April 12, 1944, Bong shot down his 26th and 27th Japanese aircraft, 2 zeros over Hollandia. That gave him 27 total kills. One more than Rickenbacker's World War I record. Bong was now the leading American fighter ace in history. General Kenny promoted him to major, sent him back to the United States for a publicity tour, war bond rallies, speeches, interviews. Bong hated it. He wanted to be flying, wanted to be back in combat. But Kenny said Bong was too valuable as propaganda, said America needed heroes, said Bong had to play the role. For 3 months Bong traveled America, spoke at factories, visited training bases, shook hands with politicians, smiled for cameras, told sanitized stories about aerial combat, never mentioned the fear, never mentioned watching friends die, never mentioned Lynch. The audiences wanted a hero. Bong gave them what they wanted, but inside he felt like a fraud. The real heroes were still fighting, still dying. He was just giving speeches. Bong returned to the Pacific in September 1944. He was assigned to 5th Fighter Command Headquarters as an advanced gunnery instructor. He was not required to fly combat missions. His job was to teach younger pilots, pass on his knowledge, help them survive. But Bong kept flying anyway, voluntarily, against orders. General Kenny looked the other way, said Bong had earned the right to make his own decisions. The Philippines campaign was underway. American forces were returning to liberate the islands MacArthur had been forced to abandon in 1942. The fighting was intense. Japanese defenders fought with desperation. Kamikaze attacks increased. Every mission was dangerous. Bong flew them anyway. Between October 10th and November 15th, 1944, Bong flew unusually hazardous missions over Balikpapan in Borneo and Leyte in the Philippines. These were not the relatively safe gunnery instruction flights. These were frontline combat missions, deep penetration strikes, fighter sweeps over heavily defended targets. Bong was not required to fly them. He chose to. He shot down 8 more Japanese aircraft during this period, brought his total to 36 confirmed kills. The missions were harder now. The Japanese had learned. Their tactics had evolved. They no longer tried to turn with P-38s. They used hit-and-run attacks, diving passes from altitude, quick strikes then escape. The easy victories were over. Every kill required skill, patience and luck. On November 3rd, Bong shot down 2 aircraft over Ormoc Bay. On November 10th, another over Leyte. On November 11th, 2 more. The kills came steadily, methodically. Bong was not chasing records anymore. He was doing his job, protecting American troops, clearing the skies, making it safe for bombers and transport aircraft. General Douglas MacArthur personally awarded Bong the Medal of Honor on December 12, 1944, at Tacloban Airfield in the Philippines. It was raining. The ceremony was held outdoors anyway. MacArthur threw away his prepared speech, spoke from the heart. Major Richard Ira Bong, who has ruled the air from New Guinea to the Philippines, I now induct you into the society of the bravest of the brave, the wearers of the Medal of Honor of the United States. On December 17, 1944, Bong shot down his 40th and final Japanese aircraft, a Nakajima Ki-43 Oscar over San Jose on the island of Mindoro. The mission was a fighter sweep. Bong was flying with Lieutenant Colonel Robert Rowland's group. They encountered Japanese fighters at 14,000 feet. Bong dove on a lone Oscar that had become separated from its formation. The Oscar pilot saw him coming, tried to evade, reversed hard. Dove. Bong stayed with him, used everything Lynch had taught him, maintained speed, anticipated the scenes, maneuver, closed the range, got within 50 yards, fired, 3-second burst. The Oscar's engine exploded. The aircraft rolled inverted, fell spinning toward the jungle below. 40 confirmed kills, more than any other American pilot in history, more than any pilot would ever achieve again. Bong did not celebrate, did not feel victorious, just felt tired. 2 years of combat, 146 missions, 40 kills, countless close calls, too many friends lost, Lynch, others. The war had taken so much. Bong just wanted to go home. General Kenny immediately relieved Bong from combat duty, sent him home permanently, told him he had done enough, told him 40 kills was enough, told him to go home and marry Marjorie and live a long life. Bong agreed. He was done fighting, done killing, done watching friends die. The war would continue without him. Other pilots would carry on. Bong had given everything he had. Bong married Marjorie on February 10, 1945, at Concordia Lutheran Church in Superior, Wisconsin. 1,200 people attended the wedding. International press covered it. America's ace of aces marrying his sweetheart. Perfect story. Perfect ending. Except the story was not over yet. After the wedding, Bong was assigned to the Air Force Flight Test Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. In June 1945, he was reassigned to Lockheed Aircraft Corporation in Burbank, California, as a test pilot for the new P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter. Lockheed was developing America's first operational jet fighter. They needed experienced combat pilots to test it. Bong volunteered. He loved flying. Could not imagine doing anything else. Testing jets seemed like the perfect job. On the morning of August 6, 1945, Bong arrived at Lockheed Air Terminal in Burbank for a routine test flight. The P-80 he would fly was tail number 4485048, brand new aircraft, just rolled, off the production line. This would be Bong's 12th flight in the P-80. He had accumulated just over 4 hours of jet time. The aircraft was different from anything he had flown before. No propeller, pure jet thrust, faster acceleration, different handling characteristics. But Bong was confident. He was a test pilot. This was his job. Bong did his pre-flight inspection, walked around the aircraft, checked the control surfaces, looked for leaks, examined the landing gear. Everything looked good. He climbed into the cockpit, strapped in, ran through the checklist. Engine started normally. All gauges showed normal readings. All systems checked out. At 14:30 local time, Bong received takeoff clearance from the tower. He taxied to runway 15, ran up the engine one final time. Everything normal. Released the brakes and started his takeoff roll. Witnesses on the ground saw the P-80 accelerate down the runway, saw it lift off smoothly, saw it climb to approximately 300 to 400 feet. The climb looked normal. Then they saw black smoke, puffs coming from the engine compartment. The aircraft began to roll right. Bong corrected, leveled the wings. The canopy separated, flew backward off the aircraft. The aircraft pitched nose down, started descending. The engine had failed. Fuel pump malfunction. Engine starved for fuel. No power. Too low to glide back to the runway. Too low for a normal bailout. Bong tried to eject. Pulled the manual release. The seat did not fire. The P-80's ejection system was primitive, unreliable. Bong unbuckled and tried to bail out manually, stood up in the cockpit. The aircraft was in a steep dive. 300 feet. 200. 100. Bong jumped, pulled his parachute ripcord. The parachute deployed, but there was not enough altitude, not enough time. Same as Lynch. 15 months later, different location, same outcome, not enough altitude. The P-80 hit the ground in a residential area of Prosensisti Ode, North Hollywood, nose down. Tremendous impact. Fuel explosion. Fireball. Bong's body was found 100 feet from the wreckage, partially wrapped in parachute shrouds. He was 24 years old. The news of Bong's death reached General Kenny while he was preparing to fly to Manila. Kenny stopped thinking about the atomic bomb that had destroyed Hiroshima that morning, stopped thinking about the war ending, stopped thinking about everything except the fact that Bong was dead. Kenny wrote later that everyone in the 5th Air Force felt like they had lost someone they loved, someone they had been glad to see go home safe 8 months earlier, someone who had survived 2 years of combat only to die in a test flight accident. The irony was unbearable. Newspapers across America ran Bong's death on the front page. Most placed it directly below headlines announcing the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Some papers gave Bong's death equal prominence to the bombing. America's ace of aces, the most famous fighter pilot in the country, dead at 24. The timing seemed deliberately cruel. The war was ending. Bong had survived everything the Japanese threw at him, and then a fuel pump failed. Bong was buried in Poplar Cemetery in Poplar, Wisconsin on August 8, 1945. Marjorie Bong was 21 years old, a widow after 6 months of marriage. She never remarried, became a model and magazine publisher in Los Angeles, lived until September 27, 2003, 58 years after Richard died. She kept his memory alive, spoke about him at ceremonies, donated artifacts to museums, made sure people remembered. General Kenny wrote a book about Bong in 1960. Title was Dick Bong, Ace of Aces. Kenny said Bong was destined to hold the title of America's top fighter ace for all time. With modern weapons, no war would last long enough for any pilot to shoot down 40 aircraft again. Kenny was right. No American pilot has come close to Bong's record in the 80 years since World War II ended. Bong's tactics became standard doctrine after the war. Close-range engagement, aggressive positioning, using speed and altitude not to avoid combat but to control the terms of combat. The official manual never mentioned Bong by name, but his fingerprints were all over the new tactical doctrine. What he had figured out through trial and error in the skies over New Guinea became the foundation for how American fighter pilots fought for the next 3 decades. In 1955, the U.S. Air Force began construction on Richard I. Bong Air Force Base near Milwaukee, Wisconsin. The base was supposed to be an Air Defense Command fighter base protecting Chicago and Milwaukee. Construction started, buildings went up, runways were graded. Then the Air Force changed its mind, decided the base was not needed. Reassigned the project to Strategic Air Command. Strategic Air Command decided they did not need it, either. Construction stopped. The partially built base was abandoned. In 1960, the land was converted to Richard Bong State Recreation Area, a park, not an airbase, a park. That was Bong's official memorial from the U.S. Air Force. A park. There is a memorial in Superior, Wisconsin. The Richard I. Bong Veterans Historical Center, opened in 2002, contains exhibits about Bong's life, has a restored P-38 on display. Visitors can learn about America's greatest fighter ace, can see his uniform, his medals, photographs, letters, artifacts from his life. The center does important work preserving his story. But most Americans have never heard of Richard Bong. His name does not appear in most history textbooks. He is not taught in schools. He is not part of the cultural memory of World War II. Most people can name famous generals, can name famous battles, cannot name the pilot who shot down more enemy aircraft than any other American in history. The reasons for this obscurity are complex. Bong died before the war ended, missed the victory parades, missed the post-war media attention that turned other military figures into household names. He was quiet and unassuming, did not seek publicity, did not write memoirs, did not go into politics, did not become an advocate for air power. He just wanted to fly, and when he could not fly anymore, he disappeared from public consciousness. Additionally, fighter aces are harder to commemorate than other military heroes. Their achievements are individual rather than collective. They do not capture ground, do not win battles, do not save cities. They shoot down enemy aircraft in chaotic aerial combat that most people cannot visualize or understand. The drama of aerial combat does not translate well to monuments and textbooks. It is too abstract, too technical, too dependent on understanding three-dimensional tactics and energy management and closure rates. Most people cannot relate to it, so they forget it. But the people who flew with Bong never forgot. The pilots of the 5th Air Force told Bong stories for the rest of their lives, told their children, told their grandchildren, told anyone who would listen. They wanted people to know that the quiet farm kid from Wisconsin had been the deadliest fighter pilot in American history, that he had ruled the skies from New Guinea to the Philippines, that he had saved countless American lives by destroying Japanese aircraft before they could attack American positions, that he had done it all with humility and grace and a complete absence of arrogance. Marjorie Bong spent 58 years making sure people remembered. She gave interviews, attended air shows, spoke at military ceremonies, donated Richard's belongings to museums. She never let his memory fade. She said Richard would have been embarrassed by the attention, would have said he was just doing his job, would have said the real heroes were the pilots who died in combat. But Marjorie knew better. She knew Richard was special, knew what he had accomplished, knew he deserved to be remembered. General Kenny told every young fighter pilot he met about Richard Bong, told them how Bong had learned to fight from Tommy Lynch, how Bong had developed the close-range technique, How Bong had flown 146 combat missions without being shot down. How Bong had survived 2 years of combat by being smarter and more aggressive and more willing to take calculated risks than anyone else. Kenny said Bong represented everything a fighter pilot should be. Skilled, brave, humble, focused on the mission rather than personal glory. The lesson of Richard Bong's life is not that he shot down 40 Japanese aircraft. The lesson is how he did it. He ignored doctrine when doctrine was wrong. He learned from someone who had actual combat experience rather than theoretical knowledge. He adopted tactics that were considered too dangerous by official standards. He closed the range until he could not miss. He took risks that terrified him, because not taking those risks meant missing, and missing meant the enemy survived to kill Americans. This is how excellence happens in war. Not through following the manual, not through doing what you are told, but through finding someone who knows what they are doing and learning everything they can teach you. Through figuring out what actually works in combat, even if it violates every regulation. Through being willing to do things that scare you because the alternative is worse. Richard Bong died 80 years ago. Most people have forgotten him, but his fingerprints are still on American fighter tactics. His philosophy of aggressive close-range combat still influences how fighter pilots train. His willingness to ignore official doctrine when doctrine was wrong still inspires military aviators to think critically about what they are taught. In his hometown of Poplar, Wisconsin, there is a small museum in Poplar High School, contains Bong's uniform, all 26 of his decorations, photographs, newspaper clippings, a fragment of the P-80 in which he died. Outside is mounted a P-38 Lightning fighter, similar to the one he flew. The museum exists to remind people that ordinary Americans can do extraordinary things, that a farm kid from Wisconsin became the deadliest fighter pilot in American history. That excellence comes from learning, adapting, and refusing to accept limitations. That is the story of Richard Ira Bong, ace of aces, 40 confirmed kills, Medal of Honor recipient, quiet farm kid who learned to be lethal by getting so close he could not miss. Dead at 24 from a fuel pump failure, buried in a small-town cemetery, forgotten by most, remembered by the few who understand what he accomplished and how he accomplished it. If you found this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from World War II. Subscribe to stay connected with these histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you are part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.